Doug Makaroff is the Executive Director of the Trust for Sustainable Forestry, a registered Canadian charity. Doug has 31 years of experience as a sustainable urban planner and real estate developer, creating new towns and walkable neighborhoods with a mix of uses, ages, and incomes. From 2006 to present, Doug has focused on building conservation communities in BC, where light on the land development is clustered on 5 to 15% of the land base, with the remainder of the forest land conserved or dedicated to the most sustainable parts of ecoforestry. He will share how this model is an alternative to clear-cutting and suburban sprawl, and it also provides jobs and homes while saving trees in this pre-recorded interview we did last week that will be followed by a live chat with award-winning musician, artist, author, environmental artivist, and activist, and Order of Canada recipient, Anne Mortifee, co-founder and chair of the Trust for Sustainable Forestry. Welcome, Doug.
It's great to be here.
Can you briefly explain what a conservation community is and how it saves trees and provides a more livable future for people of all income levels?
Well, the Trust for Sustainable Forestry has been refining the concept of a conservation community, which is a thing. It's a type of development pattern where the majority of the land is saved and a very small portion, 5 to 15%, is the land base on which you develop an economically viable residential mixed-use clustered hamlet, a number of home sites that you can sell, and that pays for the overall saving of the forest. And it's not just houses, so don't think suburbia. Think more of a European hamlet where the houses front onto narrow streets, and in the center is a community green space, a park, intensive gardening, or a library, a coffee shop, small retail. And out the back door is the wild private forest. What we're doing is we're creating the opportunity so that there can be the ability to work within walking distance of where you live by having value-added manufacturing facilities or health and wellness center, spa, massage, ecological education, or ecotourism. There are a lot of different opportunities that are available when you haven't cut down the majority of the forest. And people increasingly want to live and they want to come and visit and see BC's wonderful forests.
Oh gosh, it sounds like someplace I'd love to live. That's just my cup of tea. So your artisans would be having their ability to live and work. I could see this being a real cultural center like Chemainus has been with the murals. This could, like these communities could really attract foodies. It could attract arts. It could attract people who want to see beautiful products produced from the forest itself, and maybe you'd have little mills or workshops. It sounds like a great educational and spa place too.
Yeah, I think this is exactly the demographic of people who have come out and said, this is where we want to live. Whether it's been the Everwoods development up on Cortes Island or Elkington Forest at the top of the Malahat. Both of these at different scales. Cortes Island was 156 acres and Elkington Forest is 1,000 acres. They both have the same average density, one house for every 10 acres. But again, they're clustered into small hamlets of homes. And the demographic of the people who want to live here are not looking for intense privacy. They're looking for community, and they're also looking for the beauty of nature. And that tends to be an awful lot of artists. So we have painters and sculptors and people who are doing artisanal craftsmanship with arbutus and different types of artwork and music, and then selling those products from a market that would be there or nearby.
Sounds great. Now, is there an existing community, like you said, on Cortes doing this, or is this just sort of an evolution of what's already been started? Like, is this just a big dream, or is this really possible?
Well, we've been working on this for over 20 years with the Trust for Sustainable Forestry. And the Everwoods community is up and viable, and they have a number of absolutely beautiful homes overlooking the ocean. And then there's an eco village right in the heart of the Everwoods, 156 acres. And they have gardens there, and many of the families that are living in this eco village are making a living right there, within walking distance. The second one, Elkington Forest, we acquired the land, we put the rezoning together, we did a really extensive ecological baseline assessment so as to know where were the highest conservation values and where did we want to put the human footprint, the development. We put in all of the covenants, and we did all of this work right in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. And unfortunately, I'm not involved with that project, but from the perspective of the Trust, we did 100% of everything that we had set out to do in terms of doing all of the protections for that 1,000-acre forest. Well, on the 850 acres of the 1,000-acre forest. Yeah.
So was it a case that you how I guess the big question is, how do you convince regional and local authorities to explore these new paradigms for a carbon neutral future where they can let go of their older non-dependent patterns of urbanization? Like, what has to happen?
Well, I think the best way is to show good examples. And now we have some really good examples. The Strathcona Regional District said that they thought that the community land stewardship zone that we used for Everwoods was one of the most startling and innovative advances that they'd seen. In the Cowichan Valley Regional District, where we did Elkington Forest, they likewise said that zoning and that approach was now their new baseline for future forest-based developments. Yeah, it was really very promising. Once you show that it can be done and that there can be nature-based solutions instead of more mechanistic or piped infrastructure, and it works, then there's a lot more willingness to go beyond what is typical in suburban areas. Most real estate development is either urban or suburban. And what we're saying is, if we're going to get to a net zero future in a rural area, then we have the land, we have the ability to do things in a much more significantly sustainable way than we've ever done before.
And we need to be doing this. My goodness, this is how our first peoples lived. I mean, they had it all. They had their beautiful villages, they had their art, they had their resources right at their fingertips to stay fed, and then we know what happened. And this is really what's old is new again, that return to the land, but in a way that is with a contemporary approach using contemporary technology. But how do you factor into affordability into this so that it truly becomes a community of people of all levels of their ability to pay?
Right. Well, one way is having work close by. That makes the community a little bit more affordable, that you're not driving, commuting, having to go a long ways away. But the other is to have tiny homes or carriage houses or secondary suites as attachments to the main house that we're building. And that creates a rental opportunity. And depending on their size, they could be very affordable and very attainable. And I think that's the main way is having a whole range of people renting, people buying, and a whole range of income and a whole range of age groups too.
That's what makes a community.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what does it take? Does it take political will? Does it take communities coming together and demanding this? I know it takes more education, and I know that that through the Trust have a course coming up sometime soon. Maybe you could talk about that and answer how do we get there?
Well, I think it takes a commitment to loving the trees, first of all. And if there are people who have owned forest lands, Gulf Islands, Vancouver Island, BC, wherever, maybe for generations, and you don't want to see that forest knocked down, and you don't want to just hand it over as a park, then there are other options. There are other options to industrial clear cutting or turning it into a park. And what we're saying is that this is a third option in between, that you can do something where you're actually creating a more healthy, ecologically viable forest by creating a community in that forest. And we are going to be preparing a course. We are in the process of building this webinar that we're going to be publishing in the spring and summer on how to create a conservation community. We're taking everything that we've learned from the last 20 years and all of the professionals and the nature-based solutions, civil engineers and architects, natural building information that is evolving and becoming really exciting, and bringing that all together in one course so people can learn how to create a conservation community. And it's for landowners, but it's also for the people who might want to live in these communities and who are willing to say, I want to do all that I can to make sure that we can save this piece of property, and I want to live there too.
That sounds fabulous. It sounds like it should be required curriculum in the schools. Wouldn't that be great? You know, just you're growing up and you already know how to create your own conservation community, and you can create it, protect it, and be part of it. I just think that's fabulous.
I love that idea.
Well, you know, we believe solutions exist. Anything is possible. So when there's a will, there's a way. And I just get very excited about these types of conversations. So thanks for joining us, Doug.
It's been great to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right. Working with Doug on conservation communities is award-winning Order of Canada artist extraordinaire, activist, speaker. We just love Anne Mortifee. And if you don't know who Anne Mortifee is, you have to know who Anne Mortifee is. And we are really thrilled to say we did a film on forests with Anne called Awaken, a Forest Ballet. And that came out in the last couple of years. So welcome, Anne. Thank you for being here. I know that you established the first conservation community on Cortes Island in British Columbia, right, by registering a new land use zone, which is a community land stewardship zone, as an alternative to suburban sprawl and deforestation. Can you tell us, what does that community feel like? I mean, just give us a sense of what that's all about.
Well, actually, I bought into a community that didn't see themselves as a conservation community, but they had the basic template. So I moved into a community called Tiber Bay, and there are 13 families with 130 some odd, 36 acres. So the template was there. They did 13 because that's what they needed to pay for the land. And so when the land next door came up for sale, I just said, you know, rather than, and the only people bidding on it were clear-cut loggers, that I just said, well, we've got to do this. We've just absolutely got to do this. So 3 of my neighbors and I got together, and they had started creating the conservation community land stewardship zone. And one of them had studied with Merv Wilkinson, so he was very interested in ecoforestry. One of them, Miller, and when I was building my house there, I didn't want any wood from a clear cut. So all of it came from windfalls or, sustainably logged areas. And it was a great thing for me. And as we started to make the community next door, halfway through, I said, oh my goodness, nobody in their right mind is going to do this. And I was flying by the seat of my pants. I had no idea what I was doing. And so that was when I wanted to create the Trust for Sustainable Forestry as a way to help others save land, because it was the only way financially we could save that land next door, because none of us had any money. And so living in Tiber Bay, I moved there, Francis. It was like I came into right relationship with nature. I became a part of the ecosystem instead of having dominion over it, instead of dominating it. Well, dominion and domination are not quite the same. And I realized that I had been lonely all my life without knowing it. I was lonely to have animals close by. I mean, the wolves live near us, and we've got deer that pass by constantly. And there was a feeling of being a part of nature as opposed to dominating it. And I wanted other people to have that experience. And I wanted to find a financially viable way for people to do that, so that the conservation community as all the things that are living anyway together, where you have, and the reason I moved into that community, my son Devin was 10 at the time, and I wanted him to have friends. I wanted him to grow up in a community, and I needed help as a single mother. And so there were 5 kids going to the same class that he was going to who lived in the Bay. So he had his friends, he could wander through the woods to and visit them. I had women I could turn to. I had men I could turn to and say, could you help me? I just can't handle this one thing. And so living there, and there's a lot of artists. I mean, my next door neighbor is a jeweler. Denise and I are both singers and writers. We wrote music for the school plays. She did most of it, I must admit. We have somebody making gorgeous spoons out of arbutus trees and earning a living at it. And Mindja is an incredible puppet maker and does incredible costumes for all the plays that happened at Linnea School. So being there gave me a sense of what I'd always wanted, my privacy and space and community and friendships that have grown over 23 years. So when I met Doug Makaroff, I was just so relieved because he knew what I'd been doing. I just did whatever I was told to do. And it was a nightmare as an artist to be able to get my mind around all of the way they do things in the regional districts and so forth. So I was really overwhelmed a lot of the time. But Doug knows what I was supposed to be doing, and somehow I was able to do it. And they actually, David Butterfield, who became my partner in creating the Trust for Sustainable Forestry, he and Doug used to work together. And David, towards the end of my time putting this together, gave me a project manager who'd say, okay, now you do this. Thank you. Okay, I'll do it. 10 hours later, I'm going, oh, why do I have to be doing this? But I'm just so happy I'm doing this because I love the trees. And when I was 17, I worked with Chief Dan George, and he told me that they take their children out into the woods in case they're going to, if they get lost, and they tell them, if you get lost in the forest, ask the standing people. They saw you come in. The trees will show you the way out. And I thought that was so beautiful. And years later, when I was working in Chicago, I ended up going and spending a weekend in the forest with a friend. And we got marooned in a huge snowstorm about 2.5 hours away from the little cabin that we had rented for the weekend, and we could not find the trail. And we were lost. So he said, we've got to build a lean-to, we've got to protect ourselves, we'll just have to take what we have and blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, Chief Dan told me I could ask the trees, which he thought was very amusing. And so I walked around and I couldn't see more than 3 feet in front of me, but I walked past a tree and one branch was pointing in that direction. And I said, I'm going in that direction. That's where I'm supposed, it's showing me the way. I went back to tell Bill that's what I was going to do. He said, you've got to be kidding, So I said, I'll break little twigs and I'll come back and save you. Off I went, and he's grumbled all the way behind me, saying, Anne. And I said, no, now you have to go this way. No, now it's this way. And he said, Anne, all the trees are all pointing in different directions. Yes, but that branch is pointing that way. So we went for about 2.5 to 3 hours through this deep, heavy snowstorm. And suddenly it was dark, and it was like I was pricked by a balloon, pricked, I just suddenly went, oh my gosh, I don't know where we are. What was wrong with me? What was I thinking? And I started to cry and said, Bill, I'm so sorry. I've probably killed us, and it's dark now. And now he becomes the white knight, saying, it's okay, we'll find a way. We'll find, blah, blah. And then he says, oh, Anne, is that a light over there? And we saw a light, and we started trying to get ourselves over the branches and the boulders, everything else to the light. And we ended up at the back door of the cabin we were staying in.
Wow.
And I said, okay, I owe you my life. I'll do whatever you ask me to do. And so here I am 23 years later, still working on conservation communities.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for caring and everything you're doing. And I tell you, there's going to be a lineup of people wanting to be your neighbor.
That's good.
There always
That's
has been.
good.
Oh, thank you, Anne. Well, we'll look forward to you joining us another time and learning more about this. And I do encourage everyone, please see the Awakened film set to Anne's beautiful music and with Ballet Victoria. Thank you, Anne, for joining us.
Okay, love.